My name is Julian Mercer, and I've spent the last 12 months tiptoeing around grief as if it were a fragile heirloom I might shatter with the wrong word or look. When Tessa finally suggested a weekend away, calling it a chance to reset, to heal, I seized that lifeline without hesitation. After the miscarriage, the months of clinical white rooms, the odor of antiseptic so familiar it haunted my dreams. And after therapy sessions where I learned that silence can bruise as badly as a slap, I was desperate for any promise of peace. So I packed a light bag, a change of clothes, our toothbrushes, a pair of sweatpants I hadn't slept in because they smelled like home, and one small white candle from that boutique she loved with its blue and gold label. I slid it into my bag like a talisman. We were supposed to go together. We were supposed to step off that platform hand in hand and leave the past behind us. I arrived at the station 15 minutes early, heart thudding so hard I could taste it. Station clocks ticked in endless rows above me, announcing departures in shifting green letters, and I stood on platform 7 as if suspended in a snow globe of my own doubts. The morning was clear, but wind chopped across the tracks, snapping at my collar and whipping the brim of my cap. I scanned the bustle. Commuters trudging to offices, students chattering over backpacks, parents juggling coffee cups and messenger bags, but no one paused for a man carrying a boutique candle. I checked my phone. No message from Tessa. She said she'd text when she got here. I forced myself to breathe in, cold air filling my lungs like a promise, and told myself to trust her. Then I saw Marlo. Tessa's sister glided toward me, eyes bright, hair wind-tossed, a grin that didn't reach the eyes she shared with my wife. In each hand, she clutched a stroller. I blinked. 2 strollers, each bulky with baby blankets and teddy bears. I swallowed around sudden dryness in my throat. Julian, she chirped, too sweetly, leaning close enough for me to catch the faint scent of her coconut shampoo. We're heading to Dubai? You'll be fine with the kids. She handed me one stroller, then the other, and her grin widened to a smirk. I didn't argue. My throat tightened. I glanced over my shoulder, expecting to see Tessa racing up, the heels of her boots clicking in apology. But she was beside Marlo instead, hands in pockets, head tilted back as they laughed like conspirators. The wind carried their laughter away, but it felt as loud as a gong in my ears. I stood there in the middle of platform 7, 2 strollers balanced in my arms, my carefully packed bag at my feet, and I realized I'd walked into a trap. My candle lay forgotten in my hand, its flame long since snuffed out. Their voices trailed off, as if they sensed the shift in the air. Marlo tossed her head, kicked at a loose pebble on the platform, and said, "You look great, by the way. You've missed a lot already." My skin prickled. "Excuse me." I managed, voice flat. But they'd already turned away, their giggles drifting like smoke rings. Tessa's silk scarf fluttered behind her as she headed for the exit, her silhouette framed by the arched station doors. They walked off like they'd just handed me the dry cleaning. No warning, no explanation, just destinies exchanged. I stood still for a long moment, letting the station's hum wash over me. The squeak of wheels on rails, the murmur of announcements, the echo of footsteps. I could feel every eye on me. Commuters pausing to stare at the man with the strollers, the man they assumed was babysitting. My pulse slowed. The stale scent of fear dissipated as resolve took its place. I picked up my bag, slid the candle inside its pocket once more, and in one fluid motion, brought my phone to my ear. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I didn't plead. I made one call, and that's when their smiles started to vanish. The person I called wasn't a friend, a lawyer, or even my own family. It was Naomi Blackwell. The name they never said out loud. The name buried under layers of stories and stage compassion. The woman who, according to Tessa and Marlo, walked out on her kids like she was skipping town after brunch. But I'd seen the truth long before that morning at the station. I just hadn't had a reason to act. Until now. The call connected on the second ring. "Hello." Her voice was cautious, fragile in a way that told me answering unknown numbers still gave her anxiety. There was noise in the background, street sounds, maybe an airport, maybe traffic, but all I heard was breath. A breath that told me she wasn't whole yet. But she was alive. "It's Julian," I said. My voice was low. I didn't want the kids, still buckled into the strollers beside me, to hear anything confusing. "They're with me. You have 24 hours. For a beat, she said nothing. Then the sob came, one sharp inhale, a gas turned inside out. "Are you serious?" She whispered, like if she spoke too loudly the moment might vanish. They're safe? Are they okay? They're not just safe, I said. They're calm. I think they knew something wasn't right before any of us did. They didn't cry when their so-called mother walked away. Naomi wept. Not the kind of cry you hear in movies, all dramatic and poetic, but the ragged, sputtering release of a woman whose heart had been pulled from her chest and mailed back in fragments. I didn't interrupt. I stood there while people bustled around me, phones in hand, wheels of luggage dragging, announcements echoing over the loudspeakers, and I let her grieve because no one had ever let her do that properly. I'll get on the next flight, she choked out. You won't, I said gently. You're already on one. I just sent you a confirmation email. Flight leaves in 3 hours from Heathrow. Your hotel is already booked on this end. You'll be here by morning. Silence again. I imagined her checking her email with trembling fingers, probably rereading it 3 times to make sure it was real. I imagined the emotion hardening into clarity. Naomi Blackwell was a lot of things, but we had never been one of them. I don't know how to thank you, she finally said. You don't have to. Just get here, I said. They need their mother. Not a performance. Not a post. You. I hung up. And while Tessa and Marlo were mid-flight, sipping overpriced champagne and curating their Healing Weekend photo dump, Naomi's name flashed across the immigration network. Her passport flagged for travel. Her identity finally accounted for. And not the version they painted in courtrooms and family dinners, but the real woman, the mother, the erased one. I could already imagine Tessa's Instagram caption. Some space can bring you closer. Healing in Dubai with my heart sister. Paired with a filtered picture of the desert, when whipping their designer scarves as if trauma were a trend they were graciously overcoming. But healing, I was learning, doesn't come in curated quotes or desert spas. It doesn't come in group selfies or hashtags. Healing comes when the truth is let out of its cage. Tessa had always hated Naomi. That much I knew. She never said it directly, but it lived in her tone, in the way she'd flinch when Naomi's name came up. She was never stable, she once told me. She abandoned them. Don't get too emotionally invested. And for a while, I believed her. I wanted to believe her. It was easier than questioning what Marlo and her husband had done in Naomi's absence. But questions have a way of rotting in your chest until they rise like smoke you can't swallow. And when Naomi first messaged me 6 months ago, quietly, carefully, I didn't delete it. I read it. I reread it. I researched. The woman they described didn't match the woman who sent me documents showing forged court filings and medical records that proved she'd been hospitalized the week her custody was stripped. Sedated, under care, powerless. And yet, they filed the custody claim while she lay unconscious. They had her declared unfit, without a hearing, without a voice. I kept that knowledge tucked away like a flare gun in a lifeboat. I didn't want to use it. But when Marlo handed me those strollers and turned away without flinching, something shifted. The weight of lies hit a critical mass, and all I had to do was pull the trigger. I drove straight from the station to my place, but I didn't take the kids upstairs. That would have been too obvious, too easy to trace. I checked them into a temporary day center while I packed essentials, diapers, wipes, snacks, favorite books. I left my candle behind on the windowsill, the one I had packed so carefully. Let it melt alone. I wasn't in a poetic mood anymore. By nightfall, I had the kids bundled in the backseat of my car, heading toward a safe location Naomi didn't even know yet, because trust was a process, and healing was something earned, not assumed. But I'd bought her ticket. I'd pressed submit. I'd made the call. And Tessa? She was 30,000 feet in the air with no clue that her Instagram perfect charade had just fractured at the seams. Because she thought this story would be hers to write. But I kept the receipts. And Naomi kept the truth. I didn't take the kids back to my apartment. That would have been the first place Tessa checked. If not her, then her mother, or one of their surveillance-happy friends who never had anything better to do than comment on our lives like it was a series they subscribed to. My apartment was too exposed, too familiar, and above all, too vulnerable. I didn't know how long I had before someone realized this. Healing Weekend wasn't just a cute photo op, but an unraveling. So I went somewhere they wouldn't think to look. Miles. Back in law school, Miles Caro was the kind of guy who wore flip-flops to torch class and still managed to outscore everyone. He now ran a youth camp out near Lake Weatherby, 30 acres of pine and peace, insulated from prying eyes and cell towers. It was the sort of place where cameras didn't exist unless you brought your own, and the kids who showed up weren't followed by lawyers or Instagram likes. Just healing and anonymity. I pulled into the gravel lot around 8:40 p.m. Headlights slicing through mist and pine needles. The camp was closed for the season, but Miles met me at the gate, flashlight in one hand, coffee mug in the other. The moment he saw the strollers in my backseat, he didn't ask any questions. Just nodded and opened the gate. "You staying long?" he asked. "As long as it's safe." He handed me a key, cabin 8, the one near the pond with the sturdy fireplace and blackout curtains, and said, "You know where everything is. I'll stock the pantry in the morning." That was it. No judgment. No lectures. Just quiet loyalty. Inside the cabin, I laid out blankets on the floor and moved the furniture to create a wide open play area. The kids, Liam and Ren, watched me with sleepy curiosity. They were still in their travel clothes, still holding onto their plush animals, their trust in strangers so heartbreakingly pure that I had to step into the bathroom for a minute to swallow the guilt clawing at my throat. I wasn't their father. I wasn't even their uncle by blood. I was just a man who refused to look away. After settling them down, I made oatmeal. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm and sweet, with cinnamon from a small bottle Miles always kept in the cabin kitchen. I set 2 bowls in front of them on the coffee table. They didn't speak, just looked at me like they were waiting for instructions. "You don't have to finish it," I said gently. "Just eat what you want." Ren dipped her spoon in first. Liam followed. No crying. No tantrums. No resistance. That silence? It wasn't the eerie kind you get from kids who are afraid. It was the kind that said, "Finally." Like they'd been waiting for someone to see them, not as accessories, but as people. Later, I changed their diapers and wiped down their hands and faces. I wasn't good at it. Not polished. But I was careful. I didn't rush. I didn't yank. When Ren's onesie got stuck on her shoulder, I asked, "Can I help you with this?" And waited for her nod. Small things matter when trust has been traded for social clout. They fell asleep in a blanket fort I built using couch cushions and 2 towels. I set up my laptop nearby, pulling up Finding Nemo, the original, not the sequel. I kept the volume low and sat between them on the floor. Their bodies curled toward me in sleep like gravity was rearranging everything. And I just sat there. No scrolling. No posting. No performative empathy. I let the silence wrap around me like a second skin. At 11:07 p.m., Tessa finally texted. "Tessa, hey babe. You settling okay? Can you send pics of the kids?" Marlo and I missed their little faces already. I stared at the message for a long time. "Babe." Like she hadn't just ditched me in a public space with 2 toddlers and a smug smirk. Like I was supposed to smile and nod and pose for updates on her story. I didn't respond. Instead, I took a picture of the kids asleep between layers of towels and fleece, dim light from the laptop glowing on their cheeks, and saved it to my private folder. Not for leverage. Just so I'd remember this moment. The moment when silence felt safer than sound. When I stepped out onto the porch, the cold slapped me with clarity. Crickets hummed like a choir around the cabin. Stars were the kind you don't see in the city, clear, sharp, like someone had poked holes in the sky. I exhaled, watching my breath float away. This was real. Not a reaction. Not a tantrum. Not revenge. Just the beginning of a correction. I leaned against the railing, fingers cold against the wood, and closed my eyes for a second. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Maybe cops. Maybe lawyers. Maybe the kind of media circus Tessa had always secretly wanted. But I knew Naomi would be on a plane by now. She'd land in the morning. And when she did, she'd see them. Really see them. And they would see her. The mother they were never supposed to remember. And me? I wouldn't need to say much. Because sometimes, silence is the loudest story you can tell. Naomi's flight landed at 6:42 a.m. I was already parked at the arrivals terminal, engine off, watching the slow flood of passengers roll out beneath that gray airport dawn. The sky looked like it hadn't fully made up its mind, half light, half sorrow. I had barely slept, running on strong camp coffee and the adrenaline that comes when you know you're standing at the mouth of something irreversible. The kids were safe at the cabin, tucked under blankets I'd warmed in the dryer before leaving. They were still too young to understand what was unfolding, but that innocence made it all the more urgent. They deserved truth, not theatrics. I spotted her the moment she came through the double doors. Naomi Blackwell. But pulled up, head slightly bowed, wearing a dark green sweatshirt that swallowed her small frame. Her carry-on dragged behind her like it weighed more than it should. She looked older than she had in the photos I'd seen, not because of age, but because of what had been taken from her. When her eyes met mine, she hesitated. Then she walked faster. "Julian," she said, her voice already tight with emotion. "They're safe," I said before anything else. "They're asleep in a blanket fort, watching Finding Nemo." Naomi choked out a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. She pressed her hand over her mouth. Her other hand clutched the strap of her bag so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. "Do they know? They know something is different. And they didn't fight it. I think they've been waiting for this longer than we realized." I walked her to the car in silence. She didn't say much, and I didn't press. Some moments asked not to be filled. By the time we reached the outskirts of Lake Weatherby, her hands were shaking in her lap. When the camp cabins came into view, her tears started again. "They've changed everything about them," she whispered. "Cut their hair differently. Dressed them like little mannequins. They're still them," I said gently. "They're still yours." We pulled into the gravel driveway. She didn't wait for me to park. She unbuckled herself before the engine even stopped and slipped out of the car, walking fast, then running toward the cabin door. I followed, but stayed back, letting her go ahead. This wasn't mine to witness. It was hers to live. She stepped inside. The door creaked open. There was a beat of silence. Then I heard it. The small, hesitant voice of a boy. "Mommy." A thud followed, Naomi falling to her knees. I didn't step in. I leaned against the porch post and stared at the trees, at the way the morning light filtered through the branches like something sacred. I'd been part of many reunions in my life, clients reuniting with children, friends reconciling after long feuds, but none like this. This wasn't dramatic or loud. It was soft. Wounds don't always need fireworks to heal. Sometimes they just need space to breathe. When I finally stepped inside, Naomi was curled on the floor, both kids clinging to her, one arm around each of them. Her hoodie had slipped back, and her eyes were red-rimmed but clear. She looked like someone who'd finally found her heartbeat again. "They didn't cry," she said to me, dazed. "They just held me." "Because they remembered," I replied. Somewhere deep in them, they knew. We stayed in that cabin all day. No rush. No courtrooms. No statements. I made pancakes. Ren got syrup in her hair. Liam knocked over his juice and laughed like he'd solved physics. Naomi fed them slowly, memorizing their every move like someone trying to record a miracle. Later, when the kids napped, we sat on the porch. She asked me why I did it, why I stepped in now, after all this time. "You reached out 6 months ago," I said. "I didn't delete the message. You didn't reply either. I wasn't sure what was real. They made you sound." I stopped myself. "They lied well. They used court language. Therapy language. They used silence like a scalpel." Naomi nodded slowly. "They always did. But then I started checking things. Dates. Names. Medical records. You weren't lying. You were sedated. You were gone in a way no one should have been expected to fight through. And they took advantage of that." Her eyes glistened, but she didn't break. "I've been trying to fight ever since I woke up. No one believed me. They told me the kids had adjusted. That I'd be selfish to uproot them. They lied." "I know," she said, "but you didn't." Just then, the cabin door creaked open, and Liam padded out, rubbing his eyes, blanket trailing behind him. He climbed into Naomi's lap without a word and curled against her chest. I looked at her. "We have legal ground now." Naomi nodded. "Colette's already working on it. She filed the paperwork the second I boarded the plane." "Good," I said, "because they'll come looking." "They can look," she said, stroking her son's curls. "They won't find what they left behind." And they wouldn't, because something had shifted, not just in the courts, not just in Naomi, but in me. When Tessa and Marlo handed me those strollers, they didn't realize they were also handing me a weapon, not one of vengeance or bitterness, but of truth, of clarity. They expected me to crumble. They expected me to babysit their lie and return it obediently when summoned. But they forgot something crucial. You can't betray someone who's already awake. And now? Now they were about to learn that the woman they erased didn't disappear. She returned, with proof, with love, and with a man beside her who refused to unsee the truth. Let them pop their champagne. This was war, and we were ready. It started with the kind of text you send when you think nothing's wrong, when you believe you still own the narrative. Tessa's message lit up my screen at 8:17 a.m. the next morning, just as I was folding Rin's tiny leggings into a suitcase Naomi had brought with her. Tessa, hey babe, hope the kids are okay. Send pics. I stared at it, thumb hovering. The audacity of it made my skin buzz. Not just the word babe, but the manufactured nonchalance, like she was texting a sitter who'd agreed to watch her niece and nephew for the weekend, not the man she'd emotionally manipulated and abandoned with 2 children who weren't hers or mine. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't want to, but because silence, at that moment, said everything. 2 hours later, another ping. Marlo, any vibes are strong in Dubai. Miss you. Red heart, give the kiddos a squeeze for me. A squeeze. Like they were plush toys. Like this wasn't real. Like they hadn't made a choice to walk away from 2 toddlers without car seats, without papers, without so much as a written note or legal form. And still, they had the gall to pretend this was a spa getaway. No responsibility. No consequence. Just Instagram captions and mimosa towers. Naomi, sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open and a hot mug of tea trembling between her palms, looked up. They texted, didn't they? I nodded, scrolling. Yep. Tessa says hi. Marlo sends hugs. Naomi's lips tightened into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. They're testing the waters. Seeing if you're angry. If you've snapped. Or, worse for them, if you've gone quiet. I'm not quiet, I said. I'm building. That afternoon, I met with Rachel. Rachel Van Doren was a family law consultant I'd worked with once during a complex foster case involving my cousin. She'd once told me, the truth is rarely enough. You need receipts, screenshots, dates, motives, context. So I called her the day after Naomi landed. She met me at a diner near the highway, slid into the booth across from me, and got right to it. So you're telling me, she said, her red pen already poised, your wife and her sister left 2 minors with no legal consent, no paperwork, no guardianship transfer, and no emergency plan. Just vibes? Essentially. She flipped open her notepad. And the biological mother is back in the country? Sitting at camp right now reading The Very Hungry Caterpillar. Rachel grinned. God, I love this already. We got to work. I handed over screenshots. Every message, every timestamp, every cheery emoji that now read like evidence in a custody trial. Naomi sent over the original falsified court filings, documents that stripped her of parental rights while she was under sedation in a psychiatric facility. Marlo's husband had orchestrated it, using temporary guardianship clauses and exaggerated medical reports to make her seem unfit. Tessa had testified, lied, cried on cue, Rachel noted. She must have been coached. Next came the photo evidence. Me, at the station. The 2 strollers. My single overnight bag. Tessa and Marlo walking away, dragging designer luggage behind them like queens boarding a cruise ship. I had captured it all, by accident at first, then deliberately. Security footage, social media posts, flight receipts, all of it lined up like dominoes waiting to fall. Do you know how this will look in court? Rachel asked, flipping through the printed flight log. They'll eat this alive. Custodial interference. Reckless endangerment. Potential violation of the Hague Convention if they'd gone any further. They thought they were invincible, I said. They thought I was too broken to fight. Rachel paused, pen tapping her lip. Are you? No, I said. I'm just done being quiet. Back at the cabin, Naomi was humming as she folded laundry. The kids were napping again. These long, deep sleeps that only came after trauma began to lift. That's how you could tell children were healing. Not by their smiles, but by how deeply they could rest. I handed Naomi the printed transcripts Rachel had compiled. She read in silence, her eyes scanning each line like she was studying for a trial that would define her life. Which, of course, she was. Colette's prepping the emergency custody filing, she said when she finished. She says we'll have a hearing within 3 days. Good, I said. They'll be back soon. At 6:02 p.m., the tone of the text changed. Regina, Tessa's mother. Julian, this isn't funny. Why haven't you replied? This was supposed to help you heal. Don't punish Tessa like this. Help me heal. I stared at the phrase until it blurred. They handed me toddlers like grief baskets and disappeared like saints. Then expected a thank you card. The sheer narcissism would have been funny if it hadn't been so cruel. I locked my phone, set it aside, and joined Naomi on the floor where Rin was now awake and stacking wooden blocks into a wobbly tower. Liam stirred beside her, rubbing his eyes. "This," Naomi whispered, her hand brushing her daughter's curls. "This is what they tried to steal." "They didn't just try," I said. "They did. Until now." Later that night, while the kids were finally down and the cabin had quieted, I went out onto the porch alone. My phone buzzed again. Tessa. Tessa, still no pics? Julian, this is getting weird. Can you call me, please? I'm getting worried. I didn't reply. Instead, I took a screenshot. Then another. I sent them to Rachel. Let them keep texting. Let them keep pretending this was just a misunderstanding. They hadn't seen silence used like this before. They hadn't met the version of me who wasn't grieving anymore. I wasn't sad. I was documenting. And soon, their curated chaos would meet something they couldn't filter. The truth. They always thought I was the soft one. The agreeable one. The man who nodded in photos and stood quietly at the back of their curated lives, holding diaper bags and car keys while they took the spotlight. It was easier that way for them. Easier to label me fragile than admit I saw through the choreography. Easier to call me emotionally sensitive than face the quiet man who never forgot a detail. But I was never fragile. I was focused. And when I focus, I study. And when I study, I act. After the miscarriage, after the therapy, after Tessa's tears and silence and sudden refusal to look me in the eye for more than 3 seconds, I didn't collapse. I adjusted. I started spending late nights reading, not fiction, not articles, but case law, custody precedents, family court rulings. I found the forum threads no one talks about, the late-night legal blogs written by burnt-out lawyers who saw the dark side of family courts. I wasn't just grieving, I was learning. Because something about the story never added up. Not just Naomi's disappearance from their narrative, but the way they filled in the blanks with words too polished, too packaged, too perfect. She left, they said. She was unstable, they added. She didn't want them anymore. They said it over wine, over brunch, at family gatherings. And everyone nodded. Everyone except me. I had known Naomi before the incident. She had a laugh that felt like a challenge to the whole room. She loved fiercely, sometimes too fiercely, but she was never absent, never uninterested in her own children. So when she disappeared, I didn't just grieve. I archived. The night Naomi first messaged me, 6 months ago, she didn't ask for sympathy. She sent court documents. She told me to look at the date on the custody order and then cross-reference it with her hospital admission. And I did. I saw it. She was unconscious, under sedation. A psych hold due to postpartum psychosis brought on by undiagnosed trauma and sleep deprivation. The kind of condition that requires support, not exile. While she was lying in a hospital bed, Tessa and Marlo were pushing through emergency custody paperwork and making sure Naomi's name was wiped from every pediatric form and school registration. They did it with a kind of ruthless efficiency that made my stomach turn. And I knew even then that I would wait. Not because I was afraid, but because timing mattered. I couldn't run to Naomi's side when I had no standing. I couldn't challenge Tessa's version of the story without proof. So I watched. I waited. I consulted quietly with a Hague Convention expert I found through a legal aid forum. She explained international custodial interference in chilling detail. She told me what would happen if Tessa ever left the country while claiming to have sole custody over children whose legal mother was still alive and never formally terminated. She'd be in violation of federal law, the expert told me over the phone. If you can prove she knowingly misrepresented custody status during international travel, that's not just immoral, it's criminal. So I built the file. In secret. Late at night while Tessa watched TV or took long, unexplained showers. I saved every document Naomi sent. I requested Naomi's medical records quietly through a contact at the hospital who owed me a favor from law school. I filed them into a secure cloud drive. I labeled everything. And I waited. And then it happened. Platform 7. The 2 strollers. The laughter. The walking away. That was the trigger. That was the moment I knew I had waited long enough. Because Tessa didn't just walk away from the children that day. She walked into a legal trap I didn't set, but one I had mapped in detail. Leaving the country with minor children under false custody claims? Check. Failing to notify the legal mother of travel plans? Check. Providing no emergency contact or guardianship agreement? Double check. I wasn't just a witness anymore. I was the catalyst. Rachel filed the evidence packet with the family court by noon the next day. Naomi's lawyer, Colette Nyari, filed for emergency restoration of custody rights under Rule 48B, arguing Naomi had never legally relinquished custody in the first place and was incapable of defending herself when the papers were filed. The judge granted a preliminary review. Meanwhile, Naomi's name, restored in the National Family Court database, flagged a red light at Customs and Border Protection. As soon as Tessa's return flight was processed, her name would be flagged for immediate review at immigration. They had no idea. Tessa, from her corner suite in a Dubai hotel, still believed she controlled the narrative, still sent casual texts, still posted selfies in gold-tinted sunglasses and spa robes. Her captions said things like release, reset, renew, while the system she tried to manipulate was already closing in. I wasn't fragile. I was fireproof. The kind of flame that doesn't burn at first glance, but consumes everything when ignored too long. I spent the next 2 days with Naomi and the kids at the camp. Ren started drawing again, scribbles at first, then recognizable shapes. Liam began asking questions. Who made pancakes better? Who picked out his favorite shirt? Naomi answered all of them. She didn't force hugs. She didn't flood them with apologies. She just showed up. Every minute. Every moment. I feel like a ghost, she told me once, quietly, while brushing Ren's hair. Like I'm haunting the life they stole from me. You're not a ghost, I said. You're the main character. They just buried the script. She looked up at me then, eyes filled with something more than gratitude, something like belief. And you? She asked. What are you? I paused. I'm the one they didn't see coming. Because when people assume you're broken, they stop watching your hands. They stop checking what you're holding behind your back. They stop wondering if the man they stepped on is the same man who's been building the blueprint for their unraveling. And by the time they turn around, the fire's already started. And I never looked back. The courthouse sat like a monument to irony. Marble pillars, polished floors, and high ceilings that tried to make justice feel divine. But what really mattered was the silence. That weighty hush right before everything breaks. Naomi stood beside me in navy. Simple. Unshakable. I wore black. Not for mourning, but for finality. Because what we were here to do today wasn't about revenge. It was about correction. The courtroom was small. Intimate. No gallery packed with cameras or extended family pretending to be supportive. Just 2 tables, 1 judge, and the weight of months, years, really compressed into legal folders, affidavits, and photos. Tessa arrived late. Her heels struck the floor like she thought they could still command the room. Her lawyer, some smug man named Russell Keene, whispered in her ear as if he were delivering a script for a short film. She sat at her table, perfectly composed in a cream blazer, jaw set like she was still in control. Marlo was absent, probably advised to stay away. Naomi kept her eyes forward. Calm. But I saw her knuckles whitening around her water bottle. Her lawyer, Colette Nyari, was already laying out the documents with surgical precision. The judge entered. Older. Sharp-eyed. The kind that had seen too many family dramas to be swayed by tears or tailored suits. He greeted both parties, then said the words I'd been waiting to hear. Let's begin. Russell started with his opening remarks. Your Honor, this is a case of miscommunication, not malice. My client, Mrs. Mercer, has been the primary caretaker of these children for over a year. The trip to Dubai was intended as a temporary retreat, a mental health reset. The children were left in the care of a trusted relative, Mr. Julian Mercer, her husband. At no point was there an intent to abandon or endanger. He gestured toward me like I was a favor she forgot to return. Julian has always played a loving, supportive role in their lives. He's like an uncle to them. I almost laughed. Like an uncle? That was their fallback now? Erased the part where they handed me 2 strollers and vanished without paperwork or legal transfer. Then Colette stood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't grandstand. She simply placed a set of documents on the bench and said, Your Honor, my client Naomi Blackwell is the legal mother of these children. Her rights were never formally terminated. The original custody filings submitted during her psychiatric hospitalization were fraudulent and executed without her consent or knowledge while she was sedated under court-mandated care. Furthermore, Mrs. Mercer and her sister knowingly left the country with the children under the false pretense of full legal custody, violating state law and triggering a federal custodial interference investigation. She passed over Naomi's medical records, the timeline cross-referencing her admission with the filing dates of the custody claim. She included screenshots of text messages, Tessa's own Instagram captions, and the security footage from the train station. Me, standing alone, holding two strollers, clearly confused, clearly uninformed. Then the judge turned to Tessa and asked the only question that mattered. Why did you leave two children with no documentation and a man you didn't even notify legally? Tessa opened her mouth, then closed it, then looked to her lawyer. Russell leaned forward. Your Honor, if I may, no, the judge cut in. This is a question for the party who made the decision. Tessa's jaw tightened. I thought he understood. He's my husband. He's helped before. We needed space. Naomi had already abandoned. Colette stood again. Objection. My client was hospitalized, not absent by choice. The judge raised a hand. We're not debating her mental health today. We're examining custody legitimacy. Tessa tried again. We just thought he was helping. He's good with the kids. He's always been quiet. I didn't think he'd react this way. And there it was. The confession under the confession. She didn't think I'd react this way, because she thought I'd always be the one who stood still while everyone else moved. The judge sat back. He flipped through the folder again, then turned to Naomi. Ms. Blackwell, you've reunited with the children? Yes, Your Honor, Naomi said. They recognized me. They've been with me for the last week. There's been no distress, no behavioral regression, just peace. The judge nodded slowly. Then he gave his ruling. In light of the evidence provided, and given the falsification of legal custody documents during a period when the biological mother was medically incapacitated, this court restores full legal and physical custody to Ms. Naomi Blackwell effective immediately. Visitation rights for Mrs. Mercer will be supervised and pending psychological evaluation. This court further recommends an investigation into the original custody filings and will be forwarding this case to the appropriate oversight committee. Russell tried to object, but the judge wasn't interested. Bang. Ruling made. Case closed. Tessa sat frozen, her hands gripping the table like it might keep her grounded. Her face didn't crumble. Not then. Not yet. But I could see it behind her eyes, the first cracks in the fortress. She wasn't just shocked. She was exposed. Naomi didn't cry. She just exhaled. A long, trembling breath that looked like it had waited 2 years to escape. We walked out of the courtroom without a word to Tessa. No glances. No gloating. Outside, the sky was clear. The air crisp. Naomi reached for my hand, not to hold it romantically, but like someone reaching for steadiness. I gave it willingly. They can't take them again, she said, more to herself than to me. No, I said. They can't. Because the truth had spoken. And the silence had finally won. The headlines hit the news cycle like a slow-building thunderstorm. Not with a boom, not right away. Just a rumble. A soft roll through local blogs and parenting forums. A few hashtags. A couple of shares. Then suddenly, everywhere. I didn't need to be told it had gone viral. My inbox told me first. So did the neighbor who left a bouquet of flowers on my stoop with a handwritten note that simply read, "You did the right thing." They always underestimate the quiet ones. The article that broke it wide open. Father leaves stepchildren with grieving relative while flying to Dubai. Biological mom reclaims custody after being declared erased. It wasn't subtle. It didn't pull punches. It laid out the timeline with brutal clarity. Naomi's hospitalization, the custody papers filed under duress, the manipulated social narrative, the Instagram perfect lies, and the moment it all unraveled at the train station. They included stills from the footage, me standing there with both strollers, my overnight bag slung on one shoulder, confusion etched all over my face. Tessa's name was redacted in the initial articles. But that didn't last. Someone leaked the court filing within 12 hours, and by morning, her name was trending in parenting groups for all the wrong reasons. I didn't flinch. Not when the online comments rolled in. Half of them calling me a hero, the other half suggesting I'd destroyed a woman's life. Not when anonymous numbers started calling at 2 a.m., demanding I let the courts do their job, as if they hadn't already. Not even when an ex-colleague emailed me, subject line, "Did you really kidnap your wife's kids?" I didn't answer any of it. Instead, I did what I always do. I cleaned the cabin. I packed the kids' bags. I restocked Naomi's fridge with everything the children liked. Because this wasn't about ego. It never was. It was about restoration. That night, As the wind scratched against the windows and the sky darkened into something almost biblical, there was a knock on my apartment door. Regina, Tessa's mother. Her mascara was streaked down her cheeks in jagged lines. She wore one of those expensive quilted coats she'd always flaunted at brunches, but tonight it looked wilted, like the power in it had been washed out by reality. Her lips trembled. Her hands clutched her phone like it was the last lifeline she had left. "You've destroyed this family," she whispered. Her voice was small, hoarse from emotion or effort. I couldn't tell which. "No," I said, stepping aside to let the hallway light catch her face more fully. "You destroyed it when you decided I was your emotional help desk. When you turned me into a prop and Naomi into a ghost. You didn't want healing. You wanted theater." Regina looked stunned, like no one had ever spoken to her that plainly. Like she'd been counting on my politeness one last time. "I know this hurts," I added, "but you all built your peace on someone else's pain. That's not family. That's fraud." She staggered back a step. Not because I yelled, I hadn't. Not because I shoved her, I wouldn't. But because I was calm. Because I was standing straight. Because the man she once thought could be manipulated with a few tears was now looking her in the eye, with nothing left to give. She didn't say anything else. Just turned and walked back toward the elevator like she was sleepwalking. I watched her until the doors closed. She didn't look back. I locked the door behind her. Then I sat in my living room in silence. That was the first time I let the weight hit me, not the moral weight, but the emotional cost. I hadn't cried this whole time. I hadn't even come close. But sitting there in the soft light of the lamp Naomi once gave me for my birthday, I finally exhaled something that felt like grief. Grief for the time I lost pretending I was okay. Grief for the way I let Tessa convince me that silence equaled peace. Grief for the moments I had tiptoed instead of walking tall. But I didn't cry out of regret. I cried because I had finally stopped pretending. My phone buzzed again, late this time, past midnight. Tessa. The contact photo was still the one I took of her smiling over a slice of strawberry cheesecake. I hadn't changed it. Not out of sentiment, but because that version of her reminded me who she wasn't. I let it ring. And ring. And then, I picked up. "Julian," she said, her voice brittle. I said nothing. I know how it looks. But it wasn't what I got. This has all gotten so out of control. Still, I stayed silent. "Can't we talk? Please? I never wanted to hurt you." "You didn't hurt me," I said evenly. "You underestimated me." A pause. Then a long sigh. "I miss them," she said quietly. "They're not yours to miss. But I raised them. I fed them. You posted them, Tessa. You used them. You stood in the light that didn't belong to you and acted like it made you glow. That's not fair. It's not supposed to be. More silence. The kind that makes people scramble to fill it. But she didn't this time. Because maybe, finally, she knew she couldn't. "I never thought you'd do this," she whispered. "You mean stand up?" I asked. "Protect someone? Follow the law? You never thought I'd stop folding, Tessa. That's what scares you." A sniff. The faint rustle of fabric as she probably curled up somewhere luxurious and cold. "You've changed." "No," I said. "I just stopped pretending to be the man you needed me to be. Now I'm the man those kids needed. The man Naomi needed. The man I needed." I didn't wait for a response. I hung up. Then I powered off the phone and opened the window, letting the night breeze cut through the quiet. The next morning, I woke up lighter. Because the fall had happened. And for once, it wasn't mine. 3 weeks passed. Enough time for the dust to settle, or at least pretend it had. Enough time for most people to move on to the next outrage, the next scandal, the next piece of gossip that didn't involve strollers at train stations or custody hearings that cracked the internet in half. Tessa had gone quiet publicly, anyway. Her once daily Instagram stories, her morning wellness updates, her curated book club posts had all vanished. Deactivated. Archived. Or maybe hidden behind privacy walls, like she was retreating from the stage she'd built herself on. I didn't care. I stopped checking. I wasn't counting likes anymore. I was counting laughs. Ren giggled now, every morning without coaxing. Liam had started to hum when he was coloring, a low melodic sound that filled the corners of Naomi's living room like a secret song. And Naomi? She smiled more. The kind of smile that didn't ask for permission. The kind that came from being seen, fully and without agenda. We weren't rushing into anything romantic. That wasn't what this was. This was repair. This was presence. Then came the invitation. A white envelope, slid under my apartment door with soft gold lettering and a wax seal. My name, written in the kind of script Tessa used when she wanted things to feel formal and civil. Inside was a folded card, family brunch. Let's heal. That was it. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just an invitation and a command masquerading as comfort. Let's heal. As if healing was something that could be catered. As if the weight of what they'd done could be smoothed over with pancakes and pressed tablecloths. I didn't respond. Instead, I laid the card on my kitchen counter and drove across town to meet Naomi and the kids at the botanical garden. It was sunny, warm enough that jackets were optional and the wind felt more playful than biting. Rin wore a straw hat Naomi had found at a consignment shop, and Liam insisted on bringing his plastic binoculars even though he had no idea how to use them. We walked slowly, pointing out ladybugs, holding juice boxes, feeding ducks, and for the first time in months, maybe years, I didn't feel like I had to brace myself for disappointment. I didn't feel like a background actor in someone else's performance. I felt present. I felt steady. And I realized this was healing. Not brunch. Not platitudes. Not carefully curated moments designed to look like reconciliation. Real healing was quiet. It didn't announce itself. It didn't require RSVP cards. It happened in the way Rin leaned against Naomi's shoulder without hesitation, or how Liam called me Mr. Jules, like it was a name he'd made up himself. It happened in the unforced rhythm of a family that didn't need flashbulbs or hashtags to feel real. That evening, after we returned to the house and Naomi tucked the kids into bed, I checked my phone for the first time all day. Another text from Tessa. Tessa, I noticed you didn't come. You're really not coming back, are you? I stared at it for a while. She wasn't asking out of curiosity. She was asking because she still believed, somewhere deep down, that people like me always returned, always forgave, always folded into whatever shape she needed. I typed slowly, carefully. Me, you told me I was fragile. Turns out I'm fireproof. There was no reply. I didn't expect one. I turned off my phone again and walked out onto Naomi's porch. She joined me a few minutes later, tea in hand. The evening was soft, the kind of dust that feels like an exhale. For a while, we didn't speak. We just listened to the crickets, to the way the world kept moving forward without waiting for our permission. She texted again, I finally said. Naomi raised an eyebrow, invited me to brunch, said it was time to heal. Naomi snorted. Of course she did. Probably had a photographer booked. I smiled, but it faded fast. She thinks this is something that can be reset, that I'll just slip back into the old version of myself because it's familiar. She doesn't know you've changed. She never really knew me at all, I said. She just knew who I was when I was broken. Naomi set her cup down gently. There's something freeing in that, you know. In what? In realizing that the version of you she loved wasn't really you. It was the version she could manage, the one she could decorate. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to, because she was right. Tessa never loved me, she loved the convenience of me. The way I stayed quiet during family dinners, the way I let her sister dominate conversations, the way I never challenged her carefully constructed timeline of events. And when I finally broke, when I mourned, when I disconnected, when I asked real questions, she decided I was too much. She told me I was fragile, not out of concern, but as a warning, a reminder to behave. But I didn't bend. And now, I was something else entirely. Fireproof. The kind of man who knows his own worth. The kind who doesn't need permission to protect what's right. The kind who doesn't get lured back into burned-out homes by the promise of brunch and empty smiles. Later that night, Liam called for Naomi from the bedroom. She went to him quickly, her footsteps soft across the hallway. I heard her voice, low and soothing. I listened to the way it calmed him instantly. That sound was more powerful than any apology I could have ever gotten from Tessa. Because that was healing. That was love. Not manipulation. Not performance. Not guilt-drenched invitations to round tables and fake mimosas. This was real. And I had chosen it. Every day since the station, I'd chosen it. And I wasn't going back. The final hearing was quiet. No cameras. No whispered press. No family in the pews pretending to be concerned. Just one judge, a clerk, 2 lawyers, and the closing notes of a fight that had never been mine to start, but had become mine to finish. Naomi stood next to Colette, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, her breath measured but shallow. I sat in the second row behind her, not as a participant this time, but as a witness. And maybe something more than that. Maybe something like Anchor. The proceedings lasted 28 minutes. That's all it took to bring closure to 2 years of erasure. The judge read through the terms slowly and carefully, his voice the only sound in the room. This court affirms full legal and physical custody of Liam and Ren Blackwell to their biological mother, Naomi Elise Blackwell. The previously filed guardianship claims are hereby voided due to falsified documentation, failure to follow court protocol, and proven custodial interference by Mrs. Tessa Mercer and Mr. Douglas Wren. There it was. The moment. Not a bang. Not a declaration. Just truth. Finally made legal. Tessa had chosen not to appear. Her attorney sent a letter of withdrawal. No statement. No contest. No apology. Just silence. Her social media had gone dark weeks ago. Last I heard, she had taken a leave of absence from her firm and left town. I didn't follow the trail. I didn't need to. Some people disappear not because they're gone, but because they finally see themselves for the first time and don't know how to face it. Outside the courthouse, the air felt clean. The sky was a deep, easy blue. Naomi stepped out first, clutching a folder of documents to her chest like they might fly away if she let go. I caught up beside her and held out my hand without saying anything. She passed me one end of the folder and let out a shaky laugh. I keep thinking someone's going to come running out yelling, "Just kidding," she said. Like it's all been a prank. It's real, I said. You did it. No. She looked at me, her eyes clear but rimmed with the wear of everything we'd walked through. We did. We walked the rest of the way to the car in silence. The kind of silence that didn't ask to be broken. When we got back to Naomi's place, the kids were outside with her neighbor, drawing on the driveway in neon sidewalk chalk. Liam was attempting a lopsided spaceship, while Ren carefully traced around her own hand like it was sacred geometry. When they saw us, they dropped the chalk and ran full speed to Naomi. She dropped to her knees. "I'm all yours," she whispered. "Forever?" Ren asked. Naomi nodded. "Forever and then some." Liam turned to me, arms still around his mother. "You too, Mr. Jules?" I bent down beside them. "As long as you need me." We stayed outside for an hour. The sun warmed the pavement. Naomi made lemonade. I let Liam pour it, which turned out to be a mistake. Half the pitcher ended up on the porch. We didn't mind. Everything felt light. The kind of light that only comes after long, unbearable wait. Later that afternoon, Naomi reached into her purse and handed me something. It was a small drawing on an index card, childlike stick figures holding hands. One was labeled Mom. The other? Mr. Julian. Below it, in crayon scrawl, were the words, "Thank you for bringing her back." I stared at it for a long time. I've been called many things in my life. Quiet, passive, background, too sensitive. But this was the first time I'd felt named. Really named. Not by status or role, but by action, by presence. I tucked the card into my wallet. That evening, I went for a walk. Alone. No destination, no earbuds, no distractions. Just sneakers and silence. I walked through the neighborhood, past houses that still had fall decorations hanging in the windows, past kids riding bikes, past lives that had continued uninterrupted by the chaos mine had been steeped in. It struck me then, peace isn't a shout. It doesn't come with banners or announcements. It wears sneakers. It walks at your pace. It doesn't rush or demand. It waits for you to notice it, then stays close when you do. I'd spent the last year thinking I had to perform grief. That I had to sob harder, speak less, nod more, make others comfortable with my pain. But grief doesn't make you weak. It reveals who holds you when you're undone, and who watches from the audience. Tessa had watched, framed her empathy in social media filters, shared our miscarriage like it was content, used the kids as props to build a version of herself that wasn't true. She said she needed healing, but what she wanted was applause. And when I stopped clapping, she left. Good. Let her find whatever performance she needs to believe in next. Let her rewrite the story for people who still care about curated timelines. Me? I had a crayon drawing in my wallet, and the real story didn't need to trend. The next morning, Naomi met me on the porch with a new kind of ease in her step. "Sleep?" I asked. "Like I hadn't in years," she said. "The kids are still out. Let's keep it that way," I smiled. She handed me a mug of coffee. No ceremony, no explanation. Just a quiet offering. And I realized, this was it. This was what we were working toward all along. Not fireworks. Not courtrooms. Not revenge. Just mornings that didn't ache. Afternoons without secrets. Children who didn't flinch. And peace. Wearing sneakers. Holding hands. Building sidewalk chalk spaceships that didn't have to be perfect, just possible. That was the victory. Not the courtroom. Not the headlines. But 2 kids playing in the sun. A mother home again. And a man once called fragile standing at the center of it all. Not performing. Just present. Just real. And finally, breathing.